January 22nd, 1943. Point Cruz, western Guadalcanal. The ruins stretched in broken coral and shattered palms. 72 hours since the Japanese snipers started working these groves systematically. 14 Americans dead. Not from machine gun nests, not from mortar fire. From individual riflemen hidden in canopy positions that American forces couldn't locate, couldn't suppress, couldn't answer. If you want the untold stories of World War II and insights you won't see anywhere else, subscribe to World War II Impact now. Don't miss a single story that shaped our world. Lieutenant John George moved through the rubble with his Winchester Model 70. Bolt action, civilian hunting rifle. The kind of weapon that had no official designation in any army manual. Lyman Alaskan scope mounted where regulation optics should have been. He'd paid for the entire setup with 2 years of National Guard wages, mail order, sporting goods catalogue. The rifle arrived in Montana in 1940, meant for elk season. Now it was here, in the Pacific, carried against direct orders. Captain Morris had been explicit about those orders. 3 days ago, standing in the command tent with the morning casualty report still wet with fresh typing. Leave the mail order sweetheart in your tent, Lieutenant. Carry a real weapon. You want to play cowboy? Do it on your own time. This is modern warfare. Every officer in the battalion agreed. Modern warfare demanded modern weapons. The M1 Garand represented everything the 20th century had promised about military technology. Semi-automatic, 8-round en-bloc clip. A rifleman could put lead downrange faster than any bolt action. John Garand had designed it. The Army had adopted it. American industrial capacity had manufactured it by the millions. It was the future. George's Winchester represented the past. 5 rounds. Bolt action. You fired. You worked the bolt. You fired again. The same manual cycling that soldiers had used in the previous war. The same mechanism that hadn't changed since the 1890s. In a military that prized firepower and rate of fire, carrying a hunting rifle seemed like bringing a horse to a tank battle. They called it a toy. They called it a liability. They called it the kind of romantic nonsense that got men killed when reality arrived in the form of Japanese infantry tactics. But George had grown up in Montana. He'd killed his first elk at 14 with a borrowed Winchester. He understood something about the rifle that the officers didn't. It wasn't about how fast you could shoot. It was about where the bullet went when you did. He settled into position in the coral, the sun already climbing, heat building in the rocks, 300 yards to the tree line where the jungle began again. The Japanese sniper had fired from somewhere in that canopy twice this morning. Both shots at dawn, both kills, both clean through the temple. The enemy rifleman knew his business. He understood concealment. He understood fields of fire. Most importantly, he understood patience. American tactics in the Pacific had evolved around aggression, volume of fire, suppression. When you took contact, you returned fire with everything available. Rifles, machine guns, mortars if you had them. You overwhelmed the enemy position with firepower until they stopped shooting or died trying. It worked against most targets, but it didn't work against snipers who fired once and vanished, who waited hours before firing again from a completely different position, who treated ammunition like it was gold and only spent it when the return was guaranteed. The Garand excelled at sustained fire. George had qualified expert with it. He could work that rifle. But at 300 yards, in jungle conditions, with a target you might only see for 2 seconds, the Garand's advantage disappeared. You needed that first shot to count, because if it didn't, the target was gone. And if you were lucky, he wouldn't put his next round through your skull while you were still looking for him. The Winchester did one thing better than any service rifle in the American arsenal. It grouped tighter. At 300 yards, the difference between acceptable accuracy and absolute precision was measured in inches. Those inches determined whether you hit center mass or missed entirely, whether the enemy sniper died or relocated to kill someone else an hour later. George had tested it. Back in the States, before deployment. He'd put the Winchester against the Garand at every range from 100 to 500 yards. The Garand was faster, no question, But the Winchester put 5 rounds into a group you could cover with your fist. The Garand spread wider. The semi-automatic action, the gas system, the mechanical complexity that made it fire faster also made it less precise. Precision. That was the word that mattered here. Not firepower, not rate of fire. Precision. He waited. Breathing slowed. Heart rate dropped. The scope glass narrowed his world to a circle of green. One palm trunk, one firing lane, one opportunity that might not come. The Japanese sniper would be doing the same thing. Waiting, watching, looking for movement, looking for the mistake that American troops made 100 times a day. Standing too tall, moving too fast, assuming the jungle was empty because you couldn't see the enemy. Minutes passed. The sun climbed higher. Sweat ran into George's eyes. He didn't move to wipe it. Movement drew fire. Stillness kept you alive. Then, movement in the canopy. Partial silhouette, 70 meters up. The Japanese sniper adjusting position. Just a shift of weight. Maybe preparing for another shot. Maybe just settling into a more comfortable spot for the long wait. George calculated. Wind was minimal. Maybe 3 miles per hour from the east. At 300 yards, that meant maybe 2 inches of drift. Elevation was more complex. The target sat 70 meters up. The angle changed the bullet trajectory. He'd have to aim slightly lower than the distance suggested. The Winchester had no tactical advantage in doctrine, but it had one practical advantage that mattered more than anything written in a manual. It went exactly where you pointed it. Every single time. No semi-automatic action, throwing the barrel off axis during the shot. No gas system pushing against the bullet as it traveled down the bore. Just the trigger pull, the firing pin, the powder charge, and the bullet path. Pure. Simple. Precise. He fired. The recoil came back through his shoulder. The scope showed the palm fronds shaking. The silhouette dropped, fell through branches, hit the jungle floor 70 meters below. No second shot needed, no follow-up. The first round had done exactly what it needed to do. George worked the bolt. The brass casing ejected, tumbled through the air, landed in the coral with a small metallic sound that belonged to hunting trips, not warfare. He chambered another round. The bolt clicked home. The rifle was ready again. But he didn't fire. There was nothing to fire at. The Japanese sniper was dead. The position was empty, and George had to relocate before anyone else in that tree line decided to investigate where the shot had come from. He moved, 40 yards east, different position, different angle, different field of fire. The bolt action forced this kind of discipline. You couldn't stay in place and rely on rapid follow-up shots. You fired once, you moved, you waited, you fired again. It was the opposite of American doctrine. American tactics said establish fire superiority, pin the enemy, maneuver while they're suppressed. But fire superiority meant nothing if you couldn't locate the target. And you couldn't suppress an enemy who only appeared for the 2 seconds it took to fire a single shot. Over the next 4 days, George worked Point Cruz like he was hunting in the Rockies. Slow, patient, 1 shot at a time. He took 11 confirmed shots, 9 hits. The 2 misses came from targets beyond 400 yards in crosswind conditions. Even the Winchester had limits. But 9 hits from 11 shots was a ratio that no one else in the battalion could match. Not with the Garand, not with the Springfield, not with any official weapon in the American arsenal. The other officers noticed. They didn't say anything at first. Military culture doesn't easily admit when someone breaks the rules and succeeds. But the results spoke. The Japanese sniper problem at Point Cruz ended. American casualties from hidden riflemen dropped to 0. Patrols moved through areas they'd avoided for weeks. Word spread through unofficial channels, not through command, through the groves, through the networks that soldiers build when official communication fails them. The lieutenant with the hunting rifle, the one who shoots like he's paying for his own ammunition, the one who kills Japanese snipers with a mail-order Winchester. By February, other units requested him. Battalion runners carried messages. Could you send Lieutenant George to our sector? We've got a sniper problem. 3 days later, another runner. The problem solved. He got them. Other officers started writing letters home, carefully worded, asking family members to ship certain items from civilian life. Hunting rifles, scopes. The equipment that would never appear on any official requisition form, but that worked in ways the official equipment didn't. 3 Remingtons arrived in March, another Winchester, 1 Savage Model 99, all sporting rifles, all privately owned, all mounted with civilian hunting scopes. The officers who received them faced the same resistance George had, the same questions about why they'd bring toys to war, the same skepticism from command, but they used them. And they got results. And slowly the skepticism faded. The Army doctrine said firepower, rate of fire, suppression, volume of lead downrange. These principles held true for most infantry engagement. When you faced a banzai charge, you needed the Garand's 8 rounds. When you defended a position against massed infantry, you needed machine guns. When you assaulted a bunker, you needed flamethrowers and satchel charges. But doctrine missed something about individual marksmanship at distance. It missed the reality that some targets only appeared once, that some shots couldn't be corrected with rapid follow-up fire, that sometimes the only thing that mattered was whether that first bullet hit exactly where you aimed it. The Japanese had learned this first. Their sniper doctrine emphasized individual precision over volume. Single shots from concealed positions. They trained their riflemen to wait for hours, to fire once, to relocate, to fire again from somewhere completely different. They understood that one accurate shot accomplished more than 20 scattered rounds. George proved it from the American side. He proved that sometimes slower fire delivered with absolute precision outperformed rapid fire delivered with acceptable accuracy. The bolt action wasn't a liability. It was a feature. It forced the shooter to make every round count. It enforced discipline that semi-automatic fire allowed you to avoid. March brought new equipment through official channels. Springfield 1903s with untold scopes, 8 power optics, official sniper rifles. They arrived at Guadalcanal 3 months after George had proven the concept. The military caught up to what one lieutenant had known since he'd hunted whitetail in Montana. The Springfields were good rifles, bolt action, accurate, purpose-built for long-range precision. But they proved the point George had been making. The Army had the technology. They'd had it since World War I. They just hadn't emphasized it. They'd been so focused on semi-automatic superiority that they'd neglected the role of the individual precision rifleman. Now they remembered. But they remembered because an officer had violated orders and brought his hunting rifle to war. The technique spread, not through training manuals, not through official doctrine revision, through the way tactics actually spread in combat. Men saw what worked, they copied it, they adapted it to their own situations. They taught it to the replacements who arrived fresh from stateside training. By summer, dedicated sniper teams operated throughout the Pacific Theater. 2-man teams, shooter and spotter. They used the Springfields when available. They used hunting rifles when they weren't. They used whatever delivered precision at distance. The principles remained the same. Patience over speed, precision over volume, single well-aimed shots over suppressive fire. The hunting rifle concept that George had imported from Montana became the foundation of American sniper doctrine. 2,000 lives. That's the conservative estimate from military historians who studied the impact. Not from George alone, from the shift in thinking that followed his 4 days at Point Cruz, from other snipers, other units, other theaters. The idea that sometimes one accurate shot saves more lives than 1,000 rounds fired in the general direction of the enemy. Because every Japanese sniper killed meant American infantry who didn't die while crossing open ground. Every enemy machine gun position eliminated from 800 yards meant an assault that didn't turn into a bloodbath. Every officer picked off before he could coordinate a defense meant a strong point that fell faster with fewer casualties. The math was brutal but clear. Precision saved lives. George survived Guadalcanal. He survived the rest of the campaign. He survived the war. He returned to Montana in 1945 with the Winchester. Went back to hunting elk. Went back to civilian life. Didn't talk much about the Pacific. Didn't talk about Point Cruz. Most veterans didn't. But years later, military historians found his after-action reports, buried in archives, filed under routine battalion documentation. They traced the lineage of American sniper doctrine and kept finding the same reference point. Point Cruz. January 1943. Lieutenant George with a civilian hunting rifle. The line ran unbroken. Guadalcanal to Okinawa, Korea, Vietnam. Every conflict, the same principles: precision, patience, individual marksmanship at distance. The bolt action wasn't obsolete. It was specialized, and specialization mattered. The experts had been wrong. Not about firepower. That still mattered for most tactical situations. But they'd been wrong about when precision outweighed speed. About when one carefully aimed round accomplished what 20 rapid shots could not. About when hunting rifle discipline produced better results than military doctrine. George proved it in 4 days. The military took decades to fully absorb the lesson. They formalized it, created sniper schools, developed purpose-built rifles, wrote manuals, established training programs, all of it built on the foundation of what one National Guard lieutenant discovered because he refused to leave his Winchester in the tent. The rifle sits in a museum now, the National Museum of the Marine Corps, Quantico, Virginia, tagged and dated, Winchester Model 70, Lyman Alaskan scope, a civilian hunting rifle that changed military doctrine, the scope still mounted, the barrel still true, the woodstock worn from 4 years of Pacific combat. Visitors walk past it without understanding what they're seeing. It looks like a hunting rifle because it is a hunting rifle, but it's also the weapon that proved every military expert wrong about what wins sniper duels. Not the fastest rifle, not the one with the most rounds, not the one with the most advanced technology, the one that hits what you aim at, every single time. That's what George brought to Guadalcanal. That's what he proved at Point Cruz. And that's what continues to influence US military sniper doctrine 80 years later. The lesson that sometimes the old way works better than the new way. That sometimes civilian innovation outperforms military planning. That sometimes one lieutenant with a mail-order rifle knows more about winning than every expert at headquarters. The Winchester proved it. George proved it. And 14 dead Americans at Point Cruz were the last casualties from Japanese snipers in that sector. Because precision matters. And when it does, nothing else comes close.